All right, we left off with the Gospel of Wealth and the Acres of Diamonds. The idea of the Gospel of Wealth, written by Andrew Carnegie, was sort of like the application of Darwin's Origin of Species that was published in 1859. Sort of like an idea of the survival of the fittest, that the wealthy climbed their way to the top because they worked harder to do it, and the poor stayed poor because that was the condition that they put themselves in, and that the good old times were not the good old times. The good old times were a period of time, that you had to produce everything from your dress to your gun to your butter to your wagon wheel at the hearth, meaning in the home. Now all those things were being mass produced because of mechanization. And if not for the wealthy industrialist, the capitalist, none of that could happen. Therefore, the good times were in the present, not in the past. The Gospel of Wealth is still hotly debated to this day, because there is some merit to the part of the argument, but there's also a lot of this that is controversial, like the fact that a lot of immigrant and lower socioeconomic, and whether their individuals were white, African American, and you could even apply it then and now, what is a real big factor that limits equality? Then, and you could even say today. Race, we could play into it, but there's a factor that could potentially set you from being a have-not to a have. Yes, sir. Good job, buddy. Well done, Abdul. It is education. That is a major factor. That's something that immigrants and African Americans and poor whites did not have an equal opportunity for in this era. And we could make some parallel arguments to today. Let's take it a step further. We have Russell Conwell of Temple University. He's a preacher. He writes Acres of Diamonds. He sort of applies the social Darwinism to society as well, on the parallel of Gospel of Wealth, not necessarily on the capitalist level, or the industrialist level, but on the just societal common man level. The rich get rich because they make themselves rich. The poor stay poor because they keep themselves in that position, and it comes down to self-reliance. This is another one that's hotly debated. I feel like Acres of Diamonds, though, is not as well remembered and renowned as the Gospel of Wealth. But there are certainly some major arguments that occurred over this literature and rhetoric then, and they continue today. Corporate lawyers for major corporations use the 14th Amendment to defend their trusts, saying that they own property, and since they own property, their rights as a trust or a corporation should be protected by the 14th Amendment, and in many cases it was. Here on the left we have the Gospel of Wealth, and on the right, Acres of Diamonds. That's nice. So keep in mind that Vanderbilt controlled all of these railroads in this era. He took out guys like Jay Gould and Jim Fisk. Y'all remember Gould and Fisk? They were the guys involved in Black Friday. They tried to take down the gold market. Well, they had competing rail lines, but ultimately Vanderbilt used a number of different strategies to try to take them out, whether it be horizontal integration, meaning he would lower his rates and prices. He also had a really interesting scheme. If there was a competing rail line running in and around a river valley or a ravine, he'd buy that up and then blockade it and say, hey, it looks like you need a bridge. I own this. I can build the bridge for you. And that would pull him into a situation where he had control There's other things that he did too that were pretty brilliant. Like he built these major train stations like Grand Central, where he controlled the rail lines coming in and out of New York. Do keep in mind that Vanderbilt had gained his fortune in the steam business. That's why his family, they'll use a lot of his wealth to develop and establish Vanderbilt University in Nashville. That's why they're the Commodores. That was his nickname from his shipping days. They also use a lot of his wealth to build the largest private residence in America. Are you all familiar with the Biltmore?
Yes.
Incredible. Has anybody visited? Oh, you guys need to go visit. Check it out real quick. If you just want to pull down the lesson, type Google search the Biltmore. It'll blow your mind. I've actually got it in one of the later lessons. I've gone a couple of times. I actually want to go back. You've been? Cool. Yeah. All right, so I'll clarify horizontal integration. It was used by a lot of these guys. The guy that really perfected it was Rockefeller in the oil industry. So here's how this would work. Basically, I would move into Taylor's territory, and I would possibly drive the price of the oil down so low, and then we would go over to Aria's territory and drive the price down really low, and then move over to Rachel's territory, and I would drive my price extremely low. Can we get quiet for a second so I can explain this? So I drive these prices so low that they couldn't stay in business, and then I would take them out by coming into them and saying, hey guys, sorry about your woes. I pulled you out of business, but you have all these land holdings. How about you guys, since you ran this business, you come in and you guys sit on my board of trustees. So you would sit on my board of trustees, and now we have a conglomerated trust. I own the majority of your business, and now we're bigger. So now we're going to move over to the next area, and we're going to drive Kayla's prices down really low, and we're going to buy her out, and so on and so on and so on, till we control 100% or close to the oil industry. That's vertical integration. You just lower your prices so recklessly low that that's horizontal, that you take out your middleman. Vertical integration is a little bit different. The vertical integration is you are going to cut out the middleman, right? So Rachel and I are in a conglomerated trust, and Rachel and I have decided what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we control everything from the boats, railroad cars, and every aspect of retail, wholesale to retail. We don't have to deal with anyone in the middle to take away from our shares. That's what our trust is going to do. That's vertical integration. So think about across the board, we're going to take out competition. From top to bottom, we're going to take out the middleman. Does that make sense? So that's that. All right. So we've got an interesting scenario that occurs. J.P. Morgan, after the death of Vanderbilt, Morgan comes in, and Morgan is going to buy up all of Vanderbilt's railroad. By the turn of the century, Morgan owns all but 40,000 miles of railroad track, which is pretty crazy. And then if you think about the fact that by 1905, he buys Carnegie Steel, he turns it into United States Steel Corporation, he owns all of the American steel business, and he owns nearly all of the American railroad business. That's pretty nuts. And Emma, I'm sorry I called you Taylor. So we got some local guys too. On the left, we got James Dooley. Are y'all familiar with that location there? That's the first time I've called you Taylor, isn't it? Good. All right. You guys are both awesome, so it's all good. All right. My apologies. We're familiar with this place, right? Okay. How many people have gone to the Dooley Mansion? If you haven't gone, you've got to go inside. It's super cheap. It's a cheap date, all right? It's a cheap date. You go in, you spend $2 or $4 to visit. They've got Rutherford B. Hayes' White House china in there. Mrs. Dooley was obsessed with opulent jewelry, swans, things made by Tiffany. There's original Tiffany stained glass in there. Tiffany made her a massive, one-of-a-kind vanity made of narwhal tusk. Yeah, you know, the
poor narwhals.
Yeah, the unicorn of the sea.
Unicorns?
They are. All of the land at Maymont was donated to the city. They didn't have any children. This man made his money on this, the Richmond and Allegheny Railroad. And he worked with other local railroad guys like Collis Pierpont Huntington. Are y'all familiar with Huntington, West Virginia, where Marshall University is? It's named for Huntington. Y'all remember Billy Mahone, the guy that led the readjuster movement that didn't want Jim Crow in Virginia? All these railroad guys, they dominated the railroad coming in and out of 2 cities close to us. What are those cities? Richmond and? South of Richmond.
He said south of Richmond. She said south of Richmond.
No. What city would be a major railhead south of Richmond? South. You get on 95 and you drive, what city do you go past? Petersburg. Petersburg. They control the railheads in those 2 areas, okay? I want you guys to take a look at this. So, if we start in Richmond and we're looking at the Allegheny and the Richmond and Allegheny and the Chesapeake and the Ohio, chugga, across the state, Central Virginia. You're going to go across Afton Mountain. You're into the Shenandoah Valley. You're now into the Allegheny Mountains, and boom! Where are you right there? Nope.
You're in something Ford.
Petersburg's down here. Richmond's here. Where's that?
Somewhere near Hillsborough?
It's my hometown. This is where the Chesapeake and Ohio Rail Center is. This is the Heritage Center. This is their historical society. It's all located here. I grew up in a train town. So it's the movement of what? Yeah, but mainly what good? What good is going to be coming out of this region?
Tobacco.
Coal. Who said coal?
Coal.
Nice. Coal. Coal is going to be moving through. So what is remarkable, and I want you all to pay attention to this, if we look in our backyard behind Rockshire and Briarwood, the Norfolk Southern line runs, right? You've probably been stopped at that intersection by the train. Yeah? Maybe once or twice. And if you're going across, if you're booking it across the Powhite Bridge, going into the city, you can brake to the downtown expressway or brake to the north side. If you're going to the north side on 195, there is a railroad track that breaks right through the median and crosses a train bridge. If you look at that particular rail line is called CSX. Nearly all of those train cars are filled with coal. If you look at both rail lines, rarely do you see a passenger train. Yeah, but it's rare, isn't it? It's very rarely do you see an Amtrak come through. It's usually box cars, coal cars, lumber, So the idea of consolidated trust, I feel like I kind of explained that before, where if I took out Emma and Aria and Rachel, and what I said to them is, hey, I now own you guys' company, and I'm now the majority shareholder, but I want you guys to stay on as trustees. Now we have a trust, right? Our trust is going well until Noah gets hurt on the job. And things aren't going well. And Nick is the labor leader, and he says, this will not stand. Noah's lost his arm. What are you all going to do about it? Bless you. Okay? There's a pretty decent chance that we might want to make Emma the scapegoat here and say, hey Emma, sorry, you're going to, wink wink, lose your job on the board of trustees, and it's going to cost you a lot of money, and you're going to go to jail. Yeah, right. We've got better lawyers than that. No, here's a bunch of money. Sorry about your arm. Nick, calm down. Get your people back to work, and then everything gets going again, right? That's what the trust did. And it's not until Teddy Roosevelt and William Howard Taft and Woodrow Wilson, those presidencies, where they really try to break the trusts apart. Because for a long period of time, the trust just became so powerful, and their lobby groups and their lawyers were so strong that they were almost bulletproof. So we call these trusts cartels or pools, and we might actually get even more greedy and aggressive. Like our cartel and pool might move in and take. This is a common tactic too. Let's say that these guys over here, they've got their railroad, and they're kind of in our way, but we don't have the total power to take them out. We might find another conglomerate to team up with to take them out. And we might use horizontal integration to drop our prices low and potentially take them over. These tactics were common. So again, horizontal integration, you're taking out your competition. Vertical integration, you're taking out your middleman. The guy that perfected the horizontal integration, and really the vertical integration, was Rockefeller. I mean, Rockefeller was down to the science. Like, when his oil tankers would go through, he would say, wait a minute, if we can improve this much dynamic on our oil cars, tanker cars, then we can get that much more oil in them. And they would say, you're crazy. Why are you going to do that? Well, because I'm going to make this much more money annually by doing it. And of course, there were other strategies that were used as well that were pretty underhanded by Rockefeller, Carnegie, especially J.P. Morgan. I went the wrong way. Wait, no, I didn't. There's Vanderbilt on the left, Morgan on the right. The Commodore. Well, and it actually ended up it was like covered in disease. You have to check it out. He really needed to get his picture taken up close. And there's a really famous picture of it, like all eaten up with disease. And he's like swinging a cane at the camera because he doesn't want his picture. And so paparazzi or reporters would get up as close as they could to his face to expose his nose because he was like real conscientious about it.
What was wrong?
I don't know what the disease was. It just, his nose was like covered in like warts and was like deteriorating in parts. We could look the disease up. We'll have to take a look. So keep in mind the revolution of the railroad. It's stitching the country together. How many transcontinental rail lines do we have by 1900? 5 transcontinental rail lines, but Jarvis, hundreds of tracks through grids, stitch them all together, right? It helps the West grow. It helps the Western states become ratified. All of our Western states are going to be ratified by 1912. What's our last continental state to be ratified?
Utah.
It's a good guess? No.
Colorado.
Nope.
Ohio.
Montana. Arizona. Arizona, 1912. Is that what you're going to say?
No.
Oh, okay. So, remember there are massive railroad strikes. Remember the Great Upheaval that occurred in 1877 in Martinsburg, West Virginia? So, even though the railroad was growing, there was labor unrest. What other group did the railroad cause problems for? Native Americans, okay? Our time zones are developed because of the railroad. Eastern, Central, Mountain, Pacific. And it is the maker of millionaires. This is a really cool political cartoon of Vanderbilt taking out Jim Fisk. Now then, Jim, no jockeying, you know. Let him rip, Commodore, but don't stop to water or you'll be beat. Vanderbilt said that he was obsessed and infatuated with the business of making money.
What is jockeying?
Like, jockeying would be like racing, like as in like on a horse, like jockeying for position. And Vanderbilt ends up taking out Fisk. That New York Central Railroad connected to what city? Very good. New York, Chicago. Excellent. That's why I built Grand Central, this cathedral through transportation. A lot of wrongdoing. We talked about Credit Mobilier, this shovel company scandal that was like the embezzlement of nearly $50 million of government tax dollars. Jay Gould, he was famous for embezzling stock. All of these guys were famous for watering stock. Did I talk about stock watering before? So like, if I water stock, that means I would over speculate it. So if I'm like, hey guys, I've got Apple stock. Who's willing to buy a share of Apple stock for $200? All right, cool, sold. Well, you just lost a significant amount of money. I think Apple's trading today at like 142, something like that. I don't know, you guys can take a look. That, I've just watered the stock. Why is it very difficult to water stock today? It can still be done, but it's difficult while it's stock. Yeah, it's transparent. What else were you going to say? Do you know what organization, government organization, is supposed to be regulating the market? You're on the right track. It's the SEC. Not the Southeastern Conference, but the Security and Exchange Commission. Yeah. They mostly just got off because they had good lawyers. Or they would do like a plea and just end up getting out of it. Some guys went to jail, but the big dogs, Jurgis did. Poor Jurgis. We'll talk about Jurgis later.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't really love him.
Yeah, you empathize. So railroad owners abuse the public, bribe judges and legislatures, have arm-twisting lobbyists. They whipped and killed their workers. That could have been a problem Noah would have faced if he kept trying to fight against us after we paid him off. Could have ended up dead. Sorry, Noah. But it's okay. You made it. Sorry about your arm. Elected their own political office, gave rebates. Does that make sense to everybody? Rebates? Okay, so if you got a rebate, like you could say, hey, if you do business with us and you put the money up now, we'll give you a rebate later and you're going to get money back. So how many people have ever taken advantage of a rebate? Like contact lenses or something like that. Kind of. Phones, right? You gotta mail it in. Anybody bricked on a rebate and forgot about it? Yes. That's the worst. All right, I have. So now I want to explain sort of what the pools and cartels can do. So I'm going back to our pool, our cartel. So now we have we got control. We decided not to buy their pool out, but what we did decide was to bring in the head of their pool, and we brought Nate in, and we're like, Nate, here's the deal, man. We really want to just kind of get a stranglehold on all prices, so we are going to collectively work together to lower prices and take other people out of business, and it's going to be more, it's going to put more money in our pockets. That is what is called an oligopoly. Multiple businesses coming together to form a larger monopoly. Yes? Warren, question? Oh, okay, cool. All right. I love this cartoon. This is Vanderbilt in control of Cyrus West Fields on the left and Jay Gould on the right. So the government does fight back. People are aware of the injustices, labor strikes, the Great Upheaval in 1877, the Pullman strike in 1894, which I'm going to talk about in lesson number 4, the Granger movement led by the farmers. Also, cases went to the Supreme Court like the Wabash, St. Louis, and Pacific Railroad case, the rules that states could not regulate interstate commerce on trains. Note, look here, guys, Gibbons v. Ogden set the precedent there.
Oh yeah, the interstate trade.
Right, that set precedent. Marshall's obviously dead, but guess who's not dead that was tied into that case by this point? Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt was tied. He's not far off though. Munn v. Illinois, Kayla, good job on your research there. Supreme Court upheld the power of the government to regulate private industries. It helped the railroads, but it ended up hurting the Grangers because they're trying to determine their grain elevator prices. Interstate Commerce Act, a lot of bark, not enough bite, because why? At the end of the day, what could the railroad do with those agents?
Pass them over or kind of break them.
Okay, if you're the railroad and you have to deal with ICC agents, what might you do?
Lawyer on.
Bribe them. Yeah, you might not want to kill them. Bribing them would probably be the best way to go, and that was common. Remember, Grover Cleveland is the guy that pushed for the Interstate Commerce Commission. The idea of the ICC: eliminate the rebates, eliminate the pools, eliminate these oligopoly trusts that set rates high and low, unfair discrimination against shippers, and then banned charging more for a short haul than a long haul. I love this propaganda. It just wasn't, I mean, it was there were a handful of things. Number one, the railroad was too powerful. Number two, the agents could be easily bribed. And number three, this doesn't become a priority in future administrations, notably the administration of William McKinley. The guy that takes up the torch, Teddy Roosevelt. So Roosevelt personally takes on the railroads, among other trusts. He personally takes on Morgan and Rockefeller. I love these Granger cartoons and propaganda posters like this. I carry you all. I sail for all. I fight for all. I feed you all. So without the farmer, no one eats. This is just the classic Granger propaganda. And then here's this little guy down here, and there's the Consolidated Trust of the railroads driving over the farmers, and they're not even paying attention. And he's like, "Hey guys, the railroad controls us. They're driving over top of us."
What's up with the farmer on the side?
Farmer on which side?
The side of like the railroad. He's watching.
Oh no, he's the guy on the side's pointing at the train. He's the only one paying attention. All right, so miracles of mechanization. At the start of the Civil War, we're the 4th largest manufacturer in the world. By the turn of the century, we're number 1. As we come out of that financial panic of 1893, we have abundant liquid capital. We're using all types of natural resources: coal, oil, iron coming out of the Mesabi Range in Minnesota in the Lake Superior region. Massive waves of integration. trying to live the American dream. The ingenuity of Eli Whitney's interchangeable parts and the assembly line are going to revolutionize mechanization during this era. So we have popular inventions like cash registers, stock tickers, typewriters, refrigerator cars, the electric dynamo. Do y'all know what that is? It's like the precursor to the what? Something that maybe you have in case of a storm.
Flashlight.
Generator, good job. Electric railway. First electric streetcars were here in Richmond, which was really cool. They replaced animal-drawn carts. Alexander Graham Bell's invention of the telephone. Edison's invention of the electric light bulb. Nikola Tesla's invention of the alternating current and the induction motor. So these guys, obviously brilliant inventors, also rivals. Yeah, sure. So on the left, Edison, in the middle there, Bell, and on the right, Tesla. All right. So the trust titan emerges. John D. Rockefeller, as we mentioned, he uses the process of horizontal integration to buy out his competitors. By the turn of the century, he controlled 90% of the U.S. oil industry. Hang in there, guys. Thank you. Rockefeller and Carnegie used vertical integration, which meant they bought out and controlled all aspects of an industry: extraction, transport, refinement, production, and controlled all parts of the process. The tycoons were also known as robber barons. You know where that term comes from? It comes from the people that the robber barons, they were tax collectors for the large barons on the Rhine River Valley in Western Germany in the 1400s. You didn't learn about those in world history? All good. Obviously, J.P. Morgan put his own men on boards of directors and took out rival competitors to gain influence. One of the most impressive things Morgan did, and I think I passed over this, was his Corsair Pact. Did I talk about that at all? Y'all remember the Corsairs? The Barbary pirates, right? Well, he named his yacht the Corsair, as in like the pirate yacht. He brought his competitors out onto the Atlantic on his yacht from Manhattan, and he said, "Hey, how's it going? I'm basically going to control your business interests now. You're going to sign that over to me. I'm going to be the majority shareholder, and we're not going to go back to shore until you do so." So he basically held them hostage at sea until they signed the Corsair Pact. Here's John D. Rockefeller. Let's talk a little bit about Rockefeller Oil. Rockefeller Oil got started, Standard Oil Company of Ohio, in Cleveland, Ohio. There was a colossal great lake of oil underneath present-day Cleveland in Ohio. Rockefeller controlled 90% of all American oil and 95% of all American oil refineries. He crushed weaker competitors with horizontal integration, which he believed was part of the natural process. And he also made superior oil. Other trusts that were developed in this era: Swift and Armour, developers of the refrigerator car, but also Gustavus Swift and Philip Armour's large-scale meatpacking corporation in Chicago. And that's what the Jungle's based off of, Armour and Swift. This is a pretty cool political cartoon showing Standard Oil as this monster octopus that controlled all parts of Washington. Obviously, the government tries to tackle trusts. We've talked about the Sherman Antitrust Act. That was kind of like the ICC. Thank you. That was a lot of bark, little bite. The idea was to bring down the trust pools, the interlocking directorates, that were set up by Morgan, the holding companies that were like basically created more limited what? Limited starts with an L, where you don't have to take responsibility. Liability, very good. Limited liability. But again, there are too many loopholes in Sherman, and these teams of lawyers could just jump through the hoops or poke holes in the policy. So it really isn't until TR, Teddy Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, and Wilson start to really bust up the trust. All three of these presidents lead large-scale trust-busting political measures during this era. We're going to be talking about that in the progressive era. One in particular is the Clayton Antitrust Act that shores up the loopholes of Sherman, and it also outlawed the price fixing that the oligopolies were trying to establish. That was under Wilson's New Freedom Plan. This is another great political cartoon of Teddy Roosevelt trying to take down the Rockefeller oil industry. A little bit about the South during this age of industry. I think Warren or somebody brought up the tobacco industry in the American South earlier. The guy that really gets this going is James Buchanan Duke, Buck Duke, and his father. They developed the American Tobacco Company, establishing cigarette rolling machines. They also developed hydroelectricity in North Carolina that is still used in North Carolina today, Duke Energy. They use a lot of their money to become the benefactors and establish Duke University. The South mainly, their main industry was textiles, so they were still agriculturally dependent on both textiles and tobacco. Henry W. Grady, editor of the Atlanta Constitution, urged the South to industrialize, pushing for the New South, but the South was still sucked into this agrarian style economy, sharecropping, and the like. And it was very hard for cities like Birmingham, Alabama, and Richmond, Virginia, and Danville to compete with the North. But cities like Birmingham, Fayetteville, Atlanta, Richmond, Danville, they do become tobacco and textile and other industrial producers during this era. There's Buck Duke and James Buchanan Duke, Buck Duke, and the Duke of Durham cigarette.
Is that still around?
Well, American Tobacco is, but not Duke cigarettes. I don't think the Duke of Durham is still available. I don't smoke, but I don't think it exists. There's a bunch of stuff we can look up in relation to American tobacco. All right, so we wrap up here. America's industrial counterculture. The Industrial Revolution raises the standard of living. Immigrants swarm to the United States for job opportunities and the American dream. Labor unions are on the rise. Good job on the Knights of Labor research earlier. Early Jeffersonian ideals of the dominance of agriculture start to fall off because farming becomes big business, much like ranching. Cities like New York, Pittsburgh, Detroit, Cleveland, and Chicago become large-scale industrial centers. New York for a little bit of everything, Pittsburgh for steel, Detroit for the auto industry, Cleveland for the oil industry, Chicago for mechanization of mass production of the harvester, the McCormick harvester, and meat packing. This leads to the development of factories, tenements, and a lot of large-scale poverty. Women are going to head to the factories as well. This begins the theory of the Gibson girl, the idea of the young, athletic, attractive, outdoorsy woman who can achieve more in this era. The nation of farmers are becoming wage earners. There's still fear of unemployment due to the tightening grip of the railroads. Strong pressures in foreign trade development. Obviously, the industrial machine threatened to flood the domestic market, not to mention farmers have to compete with other farming industry, Australia, South America, Europe as well. There's constant battles over that ever looming tax on foreign goods. What's that called? Tariffs. Very good. And then large waves of immigrants launched the American melting pot theory. And we're still living that today. We are a melting pot. So here on the left, we've got the melting pot. I'll explain this political cartoon in a little bit more in depth as we move forward. There's Lady Liberty stirring it up. Who's that little tyrant on the side? No? That little tyrant with the dagger is an Irishman. This is still an era of anti-Irish sentiment. They're trying to make him look like a little anarchist. We'll talk about that later. And then over there on the right, that's the image of the Gibson girl.
She's pretty.